Good afternoon. I'm Liza Holland, a member of the League of Women Voters of Lexington, and I'll be serving as moderator for this forum for candidates for State Representative District 45. Our sponsor today is the League of Women Voters of Lexington. This forum will be available later by going to the League website, www.lwvlexington.com. We do have two candidates for this election, and they are Shirley Mitchell and Killian Timoney. Welcome. We are following the League of Women Voters policies and procedures for this forum. In order to give the candidates a fair chance to be heard, we have randomly drawn by random.org for the order of opening remarks and questions, and then a second time for the order of closing remarks. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to introduce themselves and 60 seconds to respond to questions. Questions have been created by the sponsors and have also been taken from the public. And finally, we give each candidate 60 seconds for closing remarks. We will use the second drawing for the order of closing remarks. So now we will begin with opening comments. The candidates will go in the order of the first drawing, which has Mr. Timoney first and Ms. Mitchell second. So, Mr. Timoney, you have 60 seconds.
Well, thank you. And first off, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for this opportunity. Going through the COVID time has been really difficult getting our message out. So any vehicle that we can do that is greatly, greatly appreciated. I started this journey 9 months ago in order to really kind of make a difference in the 45th. I've been a resident and an active participant in all kind of various aspects. The 45th is very, very important to me. I chose to run because I felt like I could offer a perspective or a change of viewpoint that is critically needed across the country, especially in our state. And I believe that my work as a public educator and public definitely lends to that. I'm desperately needing communication, open transparency, critical conversations, and I believe I'm the person for the job. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Mitchell.
So thank you, Liza, and the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum, and thank you, Killian, for being willing to participate today with me. So for those of you who don't know me, I always like to introduce myself by saying I am a proud product of Fayette County Public Schools, as well as the University of Kentucky. My career experiences span the United States Navy Civil Engineer Corps, Lexmark, and now I'm at Valvoline, where I actually am the leader for customer experience. I've also been a volunteer throughout the community in many different fashions, but one of them is women's ministry, working across Lexington. A few years ago, when my daughter started working in Frankfurt as a college student, my eyes really were opened with everything that shook out under the last administration and what happened with the teachers. And I decided that it was time for me to offer up all of my experiences to my state. And I consider this to be my second act of service, to bring up everything that I've been equipped with so that we can move Kentucky forward.
Thank you so much. You will take this question first. What do you see as the single most important issue facing your district? And what is your plan to address that issue?
I believe right now we're at a very unique time where everybody's wondering how we're going to come out of COVID and get back to perhaps a new normal life. So I believe that this is a very complex issue where we've got to navigate through the healthcare issues, as well as how are we going to rebuild our economy, and then how are we going to fully fund some of the things within our budget that the government's responsible for within our services. How are we going to fully fund public education? And so when I consider that, I build revenue strategies for a living. And then coupled with my passion, I spoke about the reason why I got into this was because I saw what happened with the teachers. I believe that as we move forward, that we've got to make sure that we come out of this healthcare crisis and that we get back to rebuilding our resilient economy so that we can equip the services that our government provides.
Thank you. Mr. Timoney.
I would definitely, I like to piggyback on what Shirley had said. Definitely, it's going to be our employment issues. You know, the jobs report that came out the other day was not as optimistic as I would have hoped. You know, our unemployment numbers are not coming back as our employment numbers are not coming back as they should. When we have people at work, our economy thrives. And obviously a secondary benefit to that would be the tax base that we so desperately need. I know about midway through the summer, we were given a budget report, and it was not as gloom and doom as they had anticipated. But I just don't know how long we could continue on that path without seeing serious shortages. So I think the biggest issue is going to be making sure that we're able to fund what we need to fund our requirements. And obviously, as an educator, you know, the full funding for education is critically important. But also with an air of fiscal responsibility, I think that we definitely need to look to see if there are places where there's bloat or if we are not being efficient with our money as possible.
Thank you. You will take this question first, Mr. Timoney. Comes from one of our community partners. During the 2020 session of the General Assembly, legislation was introduced on issues ranging from a statewide fairness ordinance, a ban on conversion therapy, and restoration of benefits for the LGBTQ plus veterans that were discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. If elected as a member of the General Assembly, would you commit to supporting legislation to protect the LGBTQ plus community in Kentucky? Why or why not?
100%. Those rights are guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States of America. There have been a lot of issues that have clouded that kind of viewpoint. Absolutely. Every human being has those rights, certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Those are guaranteed by the Constitution. I will support their rights till my last breath.
Fantastic. Ms. Mitchell.
So I also will support those. You know, part of my background is that I've been in corporate America for almost 20 years, where some of those things that are on the table for us to institute as policies in Kentucky, we're already living by. And so it wasn't until a few years ago that I realized that something like the Fairness Ordinance wasn't really across all counties in Kentucky. And so we really need to reconsider, you know, who do we want to be as a people, and reaching out and supporting, you know, all communities, and really who do we want to be as leaders in protecting the most vulnerable. So as a public servant, that's where my heart is. And so really just trying to bring new thought leadership to that and to bring us forward in Kentucky.
Excellent. Thank you so much. You will take this question first. Wide-ranging changes in voting practices have been implemented now during the COVID pandemic. Voters seem to like no excuse absentee and early voting, and the option of voting at super centers where anyone from any precinct can vote. Would you support changes like this for all future elections? And what else would you support to make voting easier for our citizens?
So in my middle school civics class, I learned, and I still believe, two very key principles: that democracy works best when everyone has a voice, and that voting is both a right and a responsibility. So one of the silver linings of COVID is how voting, the process of it, has changed. Our society has changed considerably since we first started voting. And I believe that it's time for us to really modernize that, so that our state election process, the laws really match how we live, how we work, and as well as match our citizens, which means changing the method of how we vote to really a robust absentee ballot process, extended workday hours, and then early voting, as well as rethinking our non-English speaking citizens who are voting, so that we can actually have things like Spanish or whatever other languages we deem necessary on the ballots for the voting process.
Thank you. Mr. Timoney.
The way that the question was worded is that voters or people seem to like, and I agree. I voted absentee. I mean, I'm not gonna mislead anybody with that. My concern that came down out of the primary election were the number of votes that were disqualified. Those were people who were expressing their opinion and casting their vote. And I believe in Fayette County, there were 6,000 votes that were thrown out, even with all of the checkoffs and checklists that were done to make sure that they had an opportunity to vote. And so with that process, it was the first process, and I have a growth mindset, just like I think we all do. I'm an optimist, and I think we can improve on that. The first time doing it, it definitely was extremely difficult. But, you know, two things I think about. I think about the imagery of post-apartheid South Africa, when Black South Africans were given the first opportunity to vote, how they had a 98% voting rate for those elections that came out. They waited in line for days. I also think about how hard my parents worked in order to get the right to vote and be civically engaged in the United States. So I think that there's definitely a discussion there. We definitely need to improve, but we are not there yet.
Thank you. You will take this question first. Prior to the governor's December executive order, over 312,000 Kentucky citizens could not vote because they had committed a felony. Will you support a Kentucky constitutional amendment that would allow men and women with felonies in their background who have fully completed their sentences to automatically regain their right to vote?
I believe that removing the right to vote from felons who have completed their punishments, I consider that to be double jeopardy. I feel like that they are being punished twice for a crime that the courts have already determined. I believe that one of the key pieces of my platform is criminal justice reform and re-engaging people who have made mistakes, served their punishments, served their consequences, and now we need to re-engage them back in society. That is, their voting rights is a critical part of that. That's an oxygen to their voice and to their commitment to re-engage back in society. I have no problem with that, and I think we are way behind with that.
Thank you. Ms. Mitchell.
So I also agree with that, and we are behind the other states on that. I think what I will tell you truthfully, what I did not know, and what I had to go off and do research about, was, that there are some lower class felonies that the governor put on the table for us to restore their voting rights. And so I had to get out and really have conversations with different constituents on both sides. And I realized that a lot of people didn't understand the fullness behind it. But back to what I said earlier, and a voting citizen is an engaged citizen. And part of, if you've paid your debt to society for whatever crimes you've committed, we want you to come back and to engage and feel a part of our community. And that includes engaging in the civic process. And so it's part of, we need to decide who do we want to be as a people. And so part of that process is bringing people back into being part of the community and not feeling like they are an outsider.
Thank you. You will go ahead and take this question first.
Okay.
Thousands of people in Eastern Kentucky do not have sustainable access to clean water. If elected, what would you do as a member of the Kentucky legislature to improve access to clean, safe water across the state?
Okay. So this is one of my passion areas. When I was in the United States Navy, I actually got to be a part of the United Nations Joint Task Force for Peacekeeping and Humanitarian Aid in Haiti. And I was able to build water wells. And so clean water is one of my biggest passion areas. And so going through this process and recognizing that Eastern Kentucky is not where they need to be for clean water. I've been doing a lot of research about the different policies that are put in place, as well as connecting with different thought leaders across our state, some of our top leaders in the country, actually, and talking about stream restoration. You'll see my big earth artwork that my daughter did. And so I think that there's many things that we can do policy-wise, as well as the conversations that we need to have for us to move forward so that we can bring clean water to Eastern Kentucky as well as any other parts of our state.
Thank you. Mr. Timoney.
Well, I think that this issue can be divided into two different categories. I think first it's the actual access and the providing of clean water to citizens, as well as the environmental aspect that Shirley touched on. I think that we definitely have some systems in place. Like, for example, in Martin County, I think Martin County was the one that you see most all over about clean water. I think that the water board there, once they were reevaluated and repurposed, and they were able to make a lot of progress. So there's the human aspect. The secondary aspect is the fact I'm an outdoorsman, I'm a fisherman, and the fact that the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife says that you can only eat a certain number of fish per year out of Kentucky waterways because of the mercury content that has come out of coal mines. I have a really, really hard time with that. That we have an environment that we are not taking care of. And I think that's holding the coal mines accountable for those types of things is really, really important. And I know that's probably contradictory from historically what my party has been about, but I think it's an important one moving forward.
Thank you so much. You will take this question first, Mr. Timoney. Access to the internet has become vital for children as they have had to learn from home in recent months. Many families can't afford this access. What can the legislature do to assure that all children and families have affordable access to the internet?
Well, one of the roles that I was in, or one of the tasks that I was given this summer, is I was the chairperson for the Return to School Committee for Fayette County Public Schools. And one of the key things that I kept coming back to was our access. My most recent school experience was assistant principal at Winburn Middle School. So I know it was Winburn Middle, high poverty, high number of, it's a Title I school. We had discussed as a school district, Wi-Fi buses, Wi-Fi hotspots, ways to get Wi-Fi out into the community. So it wasn't just necessarily at the school. The number of times I went to Winburn Middle School and I saw a student outside on their laptop just because they had internet access to do their work. As a society, I view broadband the same as when the TVA came in and brought electricity. That's where we are as a society. We need to move forward with that. Lexington should be a Wi-Fi city, and Kentucky needs to definitely make strides in that direction.
Thank you. Ms. Mitchell.
So I also have seen the impact of not having internet access, both in the education sector and the workforce sector. I can't tell you how many meetings that I've been in where somebody's internet has gone down. So I believe that this right here, this is not only what we need to do in order to strengthen public education, but also what we need to do to strengthen our workforce. And that is across our state. It's a Lexington issue and a rural county issue. And so therefore, I believe that the return on investment on this is huge. We'll get an immediate return on investment just through equipping our workforce, but then we'll get a return on investment by equipping the students and which the next generation so that they can be, get the education that they need while we're in these NTI days, virtual learning days. So I'm totally down for supporting it.
Wonderful. You'll take this question first. In a democracy, we take pride in the role that the public plays in government. How do you plan to protect the integrity of your office in Frankfort and restore the public's faith in our institutions?
Okay. My sister is actually a professor in journalism, and she's developing a textbook called Sex, Lies, and Fake News for a college curriculum. But she's teaching people how do you get your news and making sure you get an equal base of news. In her first chapter of it, she talks about the importance of town halls, bringing people in your community together and to have discussions, and people with different viewpoints to have healthy discussions. We've lost some of those conversations that we need to be having because we are, in the day where we're not so dependent on each other for our everyday living. And so I believe we as leaders need to bring us back together. I've already started it by what I call focus groups, of bringing people so that I can hear their voices, and using her journalism techniques to interview, and so that I get those well-rounded voices so that I can take that to Frankfort.
Excellent. Mr. Timoney.
Well, it's a tough thing, but it's a critical thing. And the reason why I say that is we need to increase transparency. I think that one of the things that government, and I'll go ahead and share this really brief story. The two constitutional amendments that are on the back of the absentee ballot are written in such a way that you would need a constitutional law degree in order to understand them. I think that that's a way that people can be lost. I can't read through that. My wife got halfway through and she said, "What are these things? Give me a summary. What is this?" The government needs to be a voice of the people. My work in the public school system over 22 years, you have to work with everybody. You have to communicate effectively with everyone. That's where transparency comes in. Effective communication with everyone, where there's time taken, and let's go ahead and bring in a bipartisanship approach.
Thank you so much. You will take this question first, Mr. Timoney. In our district, but especially at this time of a global pandemic, many families are struggling to feed themselves and their children. It is amazing in Fayette County that anyone should go hungry. How will you improve this situation?
Oh, goodness. Food scarcity is near and dear. As an educator, one of the things that we were taught really, really early on is that you cannot have a student accept high level issues or concepts if their basic needs are not met. Safety, food, security. Those are critical pieces. I know that I've been very, very successful working with child nutrition services with the school system to ensure that we are continuing feeding kids during the pandemic. Michelle Coker's the director. She loses sleep at night worried about kids eating. We need to make sure that our support systems are in place. I will say that one of my only criticisms of Governor Beshear is the unemployment insurance. That the fact that we still have people that are going without assistance. I think that that's something that we needed to. You have to take care of the basic needs, or people will struggle.
Ms. Mitchell.
So, one of the silver linings of COVID-19 is the awareness of the food insecurity issues across our state. When Fayette County had to take a few days to understand, how they needed to shut down for COVID and how they were still going to feed the kids that were dependent on them, I think that was a wake-up call for us. I did have the honor of helping out at my church's food bank, and we saw the lines get longer and longer every week. So with that level of awareness, I believe that there's some things that we need to put in place. The first thing is equipping our people, which is our most valuable resources, with jobs. And then we need to join the other states on putting ourselves on a pathway to get to a $15 minimum wage. But we're going to have to continue to evolve for how are we going to support those that are the most vulnerable, because how can a child learn in school if they are not well fed?
Indeed. You will take this question, and this will be our last question for today.
Okay.
In recent years, Kentucky's budget obligations have outpaced its ability to generate revenue, and it's now hitting a crisis point due to COVID-19. What strategies do you recommend to address revenue shortages while balancing spending priorities?
So first of all, we've got a short-term problem, which means we need to introduce new revenue streams. So I fully support what the governor has on the table, things like the cigarette tax, vaping tax, sports gaming. And I do believe that there's enough research behind medical marijuana that it's the compassionate thing to do under the loving care of a doctor. But on the other side, we need to rethink our long-term strategies. When you have a finite amount of land and people and budget, you can either be a fast follower to the other states or you can leapfrog them. We're getting ready to enter what I call the age of disruption. COVID-19 is going to have some amazing innovations as well as all the emerging technologies. We need to turn that into our advantage. When you think about the district that we live in that so prioritizes education with these amazing magnet schools, if we invest in that, turning our universities into entrepreneurial incubators as well as our economic growth engines, then I believe that we will be well positioned for our future.
Thank you. Mr. Timoney.
Well, I think one of the critical things that we need to talk about right off the bat is the tax incentives that are given, that there's no return on our investment. Shirley had mentioned return on investment earlier, and that's the basis of my fiscal responsibility piece. Is we can provide incentives to corporations, to industries, even for that matter. But if we're not getting anything back, if the economic impact is not there, returning, then we need to be looking in other directions, and we don't need to be giving those away. So I think that that's a critical piece. I think that there's a lot of money out there that is just that is not being, it's a good investment for us. In the short term, sports gaming, all the states around us have it. And I'm not saying, well, we have to get caught up in it, but I'm in support of that. Medicinal marijuana. The thing about medicinal marijuana that I think is key is taxing medicine. I know that that's not good business. I think that with medicinal marijuana, we need Kentucky farmers to grow it, produce it, harvest it, sell it, and that's where that needs to go. It only needs to be a Kentucky product. Kentucky bourbon is the best, and I believe that we can probably lead the country in that market too. Not necessarily a good thing, but it is a thing.
At this point, we will turn towards closing remarks, and the candidates drew a second time for the order of closing remarks, and they will each have 60 seconds, and they will go in this order: Killian Timoney, then Shirley Mitchell. Mr. Timoney.
Well, again, I would just like to thank you all for this opportunity. It's definitely a tough time getting our message out, and one of the things, the underlying core principles of what I wanted to bring to the table and what I hope to bring to the table is a sense of hope that there are people who are committed, like Shirley and myself, to moving forward, to incorporating other people in the conversation, to not sticking with the status quo, to really thinking through problems, thinking the long term, thinking of the short term, and thinking with people in mind. And that's, if this, campaign season doesn't end positively for me, it will always be a positive, because I feel like we've had some outstanding conversations about how we can improve Kentucky and specifically the 45th. I thank you all for the opportunity, and Shirley, you've done an outstanding job so far in this campaign.
Thank you. Ms. Mitchell.
So thank you, Liza, and the League of Women Voters for hosting this. Thank you to everybody who's made it this far, and to listening Killian and I talk about some of the things that we really care about. I am asking you all for your vote in this November election. If you've listened today, then you've heard my heart. If there's more that you want to know about me, just reach out to me on my website. I'm more than happy to have a discussion so that you can make a good, educated decision. I believe that we're at a pivotal time where we really need to move Kentucky forward. We need to have thought leaders who know how to solve really complex problems so that we can navigate through these really tough days ahead. And so that's the reason why I'm doing this, why I'm offering my state all of my experiences. And I just also want to say thank you to Killian for doing this. And if we were face to face, I'd shake your hand publicly, because I want everybody to know that, that both of us are doing this for the right reasons, because we want to lead Kentucky forward. If you'd like to get involved in my campaign, I need plenty of hands, and you can reach out to me at shirleyforkentucky.com.
Thank you so much. And thank you to both of you very, very much for participating today. If you are interested in league membership, please do check out our website at lwvlexington.com. And yes, gentlemen are also very welcome in the League of Women Voters. We also have a new outreach circle that you can reach from our webpage, and we encourage you to explore that. absolutely be sure to vote. However you're doing it, please be sure to vote. And you can look for additional information from candidates on vote411.org. Thank you so very much for joining us today.